First, I'd like to talk about the cup of tea I just managed to make, which was quite exciting, which is a real lesson in human-computer interaction if you look at the machine. On the right-hand side of the machine, it's got all the coffee buttons. And what I was looking for was hot water. And it feels like a machine that was made with hot water as an afterthought. Someone probably thought, oh, shit, we need some hot water. And on the left-hand side, they had the clean and shift button. They thought, we'll put it there. But rather than just put hot water, they thought, oh, I'll make a little cup with a tea bag in it. And I'll put a plus under that, and they probably thought, oh, we've got an extra button. Shit, I'll put a minus under that. Whether that sucks water or not, I don't know. But anyway, I managed to make myself one. That's the key. So we can do the whole talk on that. Right, well, 1997. That's when I started my user experience career, so that's quite a long time ago. I did a master's in human-computer interaction. It was off the back of doing a computer science and artificial intelligence degree, and I just was not ready to go back to work. But I also wasn't ready for a PhD. What's interesting about that is when I left, it was very, very hard to get any form of job in human-computer interaction, in UX. So I fell back onto my computer science and programming and started working for a number of companies, then an agency. But around 2000, it started to take off. I had a master's, people kept on asking me questions. So as well as doing the technical stuff, I ended up starting to build teams, run teams, and I've done that for many years. So this talk is about, from then till now really, 20 years, and a few of the things that really pissed me off, really, to be fair. Back in, say, 2000, if you were in user experience, you were a team of one. You did everything. That was great, right? You had full control. But if we skip forward now, these are, actually, these aren't all the roles of UX. These are some of them. I did this, I practiced it, actually, in the office, and they went, oh, you missed that. And I thought, oh, fuck. Right, give me a break. Anyway, but let's just go with this for a minute. And let's just put some headings on them. I think this is important because, these roles are difficult for a number of reasons. They're difficult to associate with as an individual. I think they're difficult to employ as an employer. And when I speak to people, they really have a job just defining who they are and what they are. This UX developer one, you can just give me a break. You really can, right? That really is a stretch. I did have a problem with UX writer as well because I had a conversation about this, and it was, so who's the UX writer? Oh, well, that's the copywriter. What, we just changed their job title. It's the same person. Now they're all UX. Great, fabulous. But what I think is, let's just be sensible, and let's just take it down to just the headings. Let's get away from the fact that we're like a cat pissing on everything. We'll own that. Fuck it, that's UX. That's UX as well. I'll have it all. Or some sort of like teenager. It's like my daughter. Everyone's trying to be special. Sorry, daughter, if you watch this back. But, so let's stop trying to be too overly special and doing a land grab, and just go with these. And maybe all of those things that I showed that are relevant, right, they're just specialisms. So you say, I'm a UX designer with an interaction specialism. If you want all the badges, like a Cub Scout or a Girl Guide, go for it. So anyway, that's just the first part of my talk. That's not what really pisses me off, so that's good. This is what really starts to make me think. And it's cut and paste user experience on one side of the coin, and on the other side, innovation bias. Now, this is quite confusing, right, because they are opposite sides of the coin. I think that the cut and paste UX comes around because there's so much out there, for us to look at. And there's so much with the quick fix, as the previous speaker spoke about on the MVPs. We've just got to get something out there. And innovation bias is just having to reinvent the wheel. I've worked on so many projects where internal UX teams spend so long on like the login form, please, right? There are design patterns, give it a break, right? And then not enough on actually the things that need innovation. Let me give you a little example of both. And this is a project that came to me back in 2014 or so. It was for a startup who was working for a very large hotel group. I've taken the names off of it. And they were making two mistakes, in my opinion. They were trying to both innovate forms and cut and paste nest. Right, so this middle section here, they wanted to be like a nest style. Great. Right, so I said, why do you want that? Well, it's brilliant. I love it. Everyone loves Nest. I said, OK, great. You know, I know UX, so I knew Fitts law and the distance between things and the width. That's going to make a difference, you know, on timing. I thought, fuck it, you've got 30 pages of this, right? So I did a load of timings around that, and this took, I think it was about 8 minutes at the time. 8 minutes for a hotel guest after they've been in their hotel to rate the hotel. God, well, if they're not pissed off by here, they will be for there. So anyway, I broke it down into 3 screens. I thought, that's reasonable. I thought we'll use some sliders. We'll put some defaults in. Defaults are good. We won't even have to touch these because not everyone's going to be interested in those 30 questions. And we can get through that quite quickly. So this cut it down in minutes. We are talking, I think it was about 5 or 6 minutes. They didn't do this. They actually went out of business a year later. Go figure. Anyway, so Nielsen was mentioned before. So let's look at a few of the other laws or principles. You've got Jacob's law. Jacob's law says if someone's seen something before and used it, they're going to like to see that again and use it. OK, that sounds great. That's copying, isn't it? Yeah, that's copying. Thing is with this that interests me is this law comes out of a set of heuristics that we're going to back from about 1994. 1994, there are 3,000 websites. No applications. Mobile, OK, there were others. But if we look at a few sites from even 1998, I'd argue that things have moved on, so something must have innovated. And the problem with laws like this and principles is they always sound reasonable. You can put it at any part in time throughout history and it's going to sound reasonable. But we need to innovate. What I think is probably more useful than that, and it comes from these actually, is there's some heuristics. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I put them up because this is like a cornerstone of my career, really. In 1996, 97, doing my master's, I learned all of these. They're embedded in my brain, as is a lot of these laws. And what it does, it allows you to look at like any site or application and quite quickly get to the crux of what's wrong with it and put it right. There's a little Chrome plugin that's really useful. It hasn't got the best ratings, but it does really help if you're doing a little UX review using these heuristics. And I'm going to make a few little sets of badges in Sketch or something so you can stamp it on your work if you want. Right, so taking a break. Got a sore throat. I feel I'm doing quite well. Anyway, a few of the other laws that are useful and interesting to know and dig a little bit deeper into. The Hicks Wyman Law started off with a psychologist in the 1800s. Hicks and Wyman made it famous in 1951. Simply states that your reaction time goes up as your choices go up. Well, that sounds great. That was moved on by Roth in 1964, who attributed it to IQ. This applies to menus, of course, but it applies in shops and stores. There have even been studies with regard to like jam. You know, if you've got 12 jars of jam, you find it hard to buy a jar of jam. If you've got 6, you're going to buy more jam, right? So this applies to lots of things. Here is the formula. This is actually the most interesting part of that formula and the bit that I find most interesting, because this means that the user is doing a binary search. And from my university, computer science, artificial intelligence that I mentioned, what you did is shitload of search, right, with lots of different things. And if you're doing a binary search, you're making a computer do that, because everything's based from psychology, right, artificial intelligence. What you know is that you can increase the choice and you can increase the performance of that particular formula by grouping and ordering, which has a crossover with another set of principles and laws, Pragna. It comes from Gestalt psychology, and it's this little set of principles. And I'll go through a couple of those now, because this is what helps you increase the user's ability to select things quickly. Proximity, we move things apart. There's 3 groups there. you can easily pick between one. Similarity, note that the white dots here, they're not the most, right, but they are the most prominent. And I can move these around anywhere on the screen, and you just can't help but look at them, even though the background there's far more. Now, if we cross that over as well with another principle which isn't part of Pragna's, which is the isolation effect. Isolation effect says if one thing's different, you're going to look at it. And likewise, I can move that around. Now, this is interesting for things like advertisements, but what people tend to do with the isolation effect is overdo it. We tend to design pages with just too much of it, trying to gain too much attention. So what I'm really saying here is if you use some of these grouping techniques and similarity techniques sparingly even, right, you're going to have a much better job of allowing the user to move around the page and select. I mentioned ordering before, and ordering is important because sometimes we do have to get the users to choose between a lot of things. Like Amazon has got a lot of things, right, but it works. And it's a lot to do with the way, oh, that was good, wasn't it? Oh, I want special effects, I'll do that again. With ordering. So the one on the left, you're going to have a real problem to to grab 6. If I say 6 first or 2, there's a mistake in these slides, see if you can spot it. And the same goes for ordering alphabetically. This allows the user to split. Just think of these as animals. If this was, antelope to zebra, and I asked you to pick, I don't know, terrapin, right? You could have quite a long list, but you're going to quite quickly binary search that and chop, 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 right, before to get to the answer. And while you're doing all of this, it's interesting to think about, potentially, the Doherty threshold, which states that a perfect interaction between a user and a computer is 400 milliseconds. Now, what's the most interesting about the Doherty threshold is you've got sites like the Laws of UX, which is excellent. Some of these slides were sort of mutated off of that. But what's interesting about these sites is I find that people don't look at anything more than the picture or the headline. It's a bit like reading a newspaper. This law is actually misstated because it says 400 milliseconds. 400 milliseconds isn't stated anywhere in Doherty's paper. I think that where it actually comes from is there's a part of the paper where it says 0.3 of a second to do 372 actions in an hour, and I think they've done the calculation and rounded it. That's all I can think they come from. But the actual 400 milliseconds comes from a TV show called *Halt and Catch Fire*. So it's quite amusing that something from TV comes through. It's a bit like Star Trek, isn't it? Exciting. So what I'm really saying is you need to think a bit more. Now, what I've done here, I've put Miller's Law because Miller's Law says that people can remember 7 plus or minus 2 things. So I've actually shown you 9 things in this section, so it'd be interesting if you can remember them all and remember them in order. But, I think maybe you're really smart. Yay. So we go for 10. Right, so serial position in effect. I love this one because it just says you're going to remember the first thing I said, so you're probably only going to remember bloody about the coffee machine now. But what I want you to remember is that I started this section with the cut and paste UX and innovation. And then what you'll remember is the last thing I'll say, which I'll say in a minute. What's interesting about this is when I was 16 going on a camping trip with my friend, we sat in my kitchen, well, my mum and dad's kitchen. I didn't have a house then. And we started to pack our bags, and I think I started saying I'd pack a waistcoat, and we got into that game where you had to keep on remembering things. Now, I remember the first thing was a waistcoat, but I also remember the last thing was the Abyssinian battle force. We went a bit out there. But I can't remember any of the in between. There was about 37 items, but I can remember those 2 still, so that's cool. So what I want to leave you with is this. Copying is valuable, but understanding what you're copying is invaluable, and it's that leads to innovation. So thank you very much for your time, and we're hiring if anyone's interested.
Right, so Again, we've got time for one question. Obviously,
what is it? Why did I swear too much? I can't help myself.
That's for afterwards when we politely ask you to leave. But no. For now, obviously, UX is an area that people come into from lots of different backgrounds. So for people without a science background, obviously you mentioned kind of one resource, but where would you suggest they begin if they're looking to develop some of the knowledge that you've had up here today?
Yeah, well, I definitely think it's worth coming to things like this. There's so much out there, but I mean, I don't know books are old hat, but Audible and stuff. I'd like to pick a few books that are good, and it's worth keeping up with everything. It's not just user experience. You know, I just read the Design Sprint book, and there's a book called Habits, which is quite interesting. Just keep on understanding humans. It's not just UX, it's the psychology of people. So watch them, look at the machines, question. I was going to put some pictures of lifts. Lifts just drive me crazy. but I didn't do that. But just look at the stuff around you. Firstly, engage. It's not just a job, right? It's something you should enjoy. And you're going to enjoy it more if you engage with all these books, things, talk to people, work with great people. I was lucky enough, you know, over my career to work with some absolutely fabulous people. And you just keep with those as long as you possibly can. And you know, that's probably the best advice I can give.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Huge round of applause, Mark Edgington. So we've had a couple of questions about whether...